Ready?
Full live stream?
Yep.
Right, welcome to councillors, staff and those joining us online this meeting of council on the 24th of June 2025. The purpose of this meeting is to approve and adopt the annual plan 2025-26, set the rates, due dates for payment of the rates and the penalties regime. Council will also consider and decide on the rating funding impact statement considering the staff recommendation and that recommended by the Franz Joseph Rating District Joint Committee. Before we start, I'll read the prayer, which is Almighty and ever-living God, in whose hands are the rights and hopes of all people. Look graciously upon us who govern. Guide us so that our council may be wise and our citizens are just. Amen. Right, second item on the agenda is apologies. I'm not sure, Councillor Cummings, has anyone heard from Councillor Cummings? He's coming, so we're just putting a late apology in. No further apologies. So item Francois, was anyone did he put haven't received an apology from Francois? So next item is declarations of interest. Okay, right. We'll move that. Someone like to move that Brett's a late apology. Councillor Birchfield, Councillor Campbell, thank you. Next item is declaration of interest. So anyone got any declaration of interest, bring them up as we go through or the item. Right, the next item we've got is 4.1, which is the annual plan 2025-26. But before I move to the recommendations, I wish to thank all staff involved, but primarily Stuart, Peter Miller, and the corporate staff for the quality of this annual plan. The plan shows how far we've come over the past few years and in line with what we previously consulted on for year 2 of the long-term plan, which will see council operating in the surplus in year 4. Under the direction of the current council, we are now budgeting to operate with an expected income for the first time in many years. But now I'll ask Stuart to run us through the report summary. Stuart, the floor is yours.
Thank you, our annual plan is, the community, and this is what we are going to deliver for the year. And we appreciate we'll report on that during the year. It is, as the chair has said, following on from the LTP for year 2 and continues on that commitment. So as you'll be aware, we didn't need to consult because there's no change of significance from what we've already committed to in the LTP for year 2. There is this does follow on from the previous meetings we've had on the annual plan, but there is one element that is outstanding at this point in time, and that is the setting of the rates for Franz Joseph. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through that in detail now, or would you like to actually take the discussion?
Yep, no, Stuart, you can go through that at the moment. Councillors, please.
Thank you. So there are 2 options presented to council for Franz Joseph. There is one which sets a rate for Franz Joseph at a higher level as recommended by staff, which is 262,481. So that's for the operating and maintenance costs for Franz Joseph. Now, councillors will be aware that the Joint Committee made a recommendation to council of setting that rate for the same thing of $150,000 for the year. So the annual plan as presented to you at this point in time includes the maintenance and operating and maintenance costs at $262,000. What we've done though, because they do need to decide on that today, is put an alternative through as a separate insert with the financial position and ratings at the $150,000 should you wish to decide to do that. So you do have that option. Now, moving on, you will also be aware that the asset management plan for Franz Joseph has a prudent reserve of $670,000, and the current prudent reserve for Franz Joseph is $147,000 rounded up. So just indicating that the prudent reserve is fairly low compared to where we'd expect that to be according to the asset management plan, And if you did set the rate at 150,000 for operating and maintenance costs, the risk is that they could impact further on the prudent reserve for that joint committee, with consequential impacts on ratings in future years if the prudent reserve becomes far lower. So just keeping you in the loop on that one. Peter, do you want to make any comments on this?
I think you've articulated it well, Stuart. I mean, it is just that question around whether we want the prudent reserve to get to that 670 number and just what timeline that we're looking to do that in. Because at the moment, if we take the decision around 150, then we'll basically take another 100 odd out of the prudent reserve that's there now, and it just makes it down the road a bit harder to get to that 670 number. So it's just the
So going at the meeting in France, they didn't have the information about the resource consent conditions for stage 1. And I believe that, morning Brett. I believe that Tom, you actually wrote to the members of that committee and outlined that. And Tom, would you like to speak to that or just give us an update on that? Councillor's not aware of what happened.
Yeah, sure can, Mr. Chair. So at the request of councillors following the most recent council meeting, we discussed this item. You requested I went back to the joint committee, provide them with some background to the reasoning why staff had proposed a higher operating and maintenance rate strike. That was battered backwards and forwards between myself and one local that's represented on the committee down there. That ratepayer expressed his preference to stick with the rate strike endorsed by the joint committee at the meeting on 12th of February. I have no other feedback from any other joint committee member on that item.
Thanks, Tom. That's clear. Righto, so we'll move on. So my intention is to present and move each recommendation individually. So the first recommendation is 1, that council resolve to receive the report. Do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Ewan, second by Councillor Cole. All in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. The second item is that council resolve to note changes to the draft annual plan presented to council on the 3rd of June 2025 as detailed in the change log. So the change log is on page 87. And is there any questions of Stuart on items on the change log? Has anyone got any questions on that? I think, Stuart, you've clarified and answered most of those questions about what happened on the meeting of June the 3rd. So, okay, so I'll call for a mover and a second on that. Mover for that. And Councillor Campbell, seconded. I'm happy to second that. All in favour? Say aye. Aye. Against? Thanks. That's carried. Item 4. Item 3. Agree to the level to which rates are set for the operation and maintenance of the Franz Joseph separate rating area for the period 1 July 2025 to 30th of June 2026. And I'll open this up for discussion. So I think everyone's read the information, and so there's 2 items here, councillors. We can actually agree to the level of which the rates are set for the maintenance, what was recommended by council, which is 262,481, or we can actually agree to the budget which was recommended by the joint committee to council of 150,000. So I'm happy to take any conversations on that.
I would be prepared to move the rating district recommendation of 150.
Yep. I'm happy to second that.
Just a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Yep.
You had one response then from that thing, Tom. You had one response. Western District Council's a ratepayer too. You had no response from them. They wanted to lead it. Okay. No, I'm happy because When you don't get responses like that, there's no uproar to go the other way, you stay with the status quo, that's convention. So I'm happy with the 152 then. But there'll be a thing next year, they'll have to address it.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I was talking to Darryl Straight about it, the Tom about it. And he hadn't heard any feedback from any of the other committee members, but he said, well, if they have to lift it, well, they have to, but he said, we'd like to see our money spent wisely. So that's the only feedback we really got from him.
Other comments or questions? Any councillors?
Yeah, I'll be happy to move the ratepayers recommendation, Peter.
Sorry, we've actually had a mover and seconder,
Yep.
so we're just on discussion at the moment, Mark, so.
Yep.
I'm happy with the ratepayers recommendation because with all the other work going on down there at the moment, it's just, there's wait and see, I guess.
Councillor Cole?
They are aware that if it does exceed what they're budgeting, they'll have to cough up more. It's
Correct, yeah.
okay, that's right.
That'll actually have to happen in the next year, as it could be a rating increase. From my understanding too, the prudent reserve was a lot higher, but that was eroded through the repayment, which was agreed by the joint committee to one of the rating districts there. So that eroded away.
We haven't had that payment yet, just not clear on that, but it is. in the
Yep,
pipeline.
accounted for, yeah.
Next month.
So that will affect the prudent reserve, and that's what will happen at the next year of that rating district. They will have to address that situation of where the budget is. Darryl, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment, look, this is a council decision and that's fine, fully respect that. But just so that council are also aware that with all the work that we've done down there, on the north side and now starting work on the south side, the value of those assets are going to go up compared to where they've been. I'm pretty sure that the prudent reserve target level of 670 is based on the valuation as it is now, not the increased valuation when the works. And so, but it is right that, when you finish the work, it's pretty good from a maintenance point of view for a few years. I acknowledge that. But of course, the Waiho being the Waiho, if we have a major flood, even the new works could get damaged. And so it's highly likely that the prudent reserve level, which is based on asset value, we'll recalculate that, and it will need to lift again for our years. And that will further highlight if the prudent reserve levels are low compared to where they should be. And then also noting the knock-on effect with insurance and NEMA and all those other things that we've been hearing about of late as well. So look, all of that needs to be a good conversation at the next joint committee, probably, I think. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no further discussion. Right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour say aye. Aye, against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is to approve the annual plan for 2025-26. And I just want to note to councillors that now we've made that decision. The pages that will be relevant are pages 109 to 120 of the papers. So the 96 to 108 are not. So I'd just like someone to move that before we open it for discussion. And move and seconder. So I'm happy to move that we seconded by Councillor Ewan. So I'll open it up for discussion. Any questions or about the annual plan? Relevant to those pages 109 to 120. Questions or comments?
109 to 120. This is all rating district. It's all rating district.
That's, well, are we correct there, Stuart? There's been given two lots of information here based on what recommendation we made for the Franz Joseph. So page 109, if you look at the top of your page here.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can help. So the pages 109 to 120 reflect the decision that you've just made of rating and what that means in terms of the financial statements, in terms of only rating Franz Joseph at 150 rather than the 260.
Yep.
That's
So-
correct.
So all the pages are still relevant, but there's just that part we've got to take out when you're looking at that. Is the pages 96 to 108.
And that's the only
The
thing.
figures are not relevant because we've
That's-
made that decision.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And that's the
Thank
only
you.
thing I just add to your conversation, that it's the entire annual plan,
Yes.
with the removal of the current financials and insertion of those new ones, 109 onwards. Is that helpful?
Yep, that's helpful. Thanks. Yeah. We've still got the whole plan, which we've all been. Any questions or discussion? Right. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. The next item is item 5, and that's approved that the chief executive can make.
We just approved the annual plan.
No, it's just the rating district.
You've gone to 5. You've got to go back to 4.
We've done 4. We've just done 4, councillor Birchfield.
Talking about the rating district.
No, we approved the annual plan for 25-26, and that was moved unanimously.
That's a mistake on my part, because I do not approve the annual plan for 205, 25-26. I'd like my vote against it. There was a question I wanted to ask.
Well, actually, we'll go back then if there was misunderstanding. Yep, you certainly can. Yep.
You're just talking about the rating district.
No, I actually made it quite clear we approved the annual plan 2025-26, but we'll go back, councillor.
Yes, you need to. The question I want to ask, Stuart, on page 47,
We'll all go to page 47.
revenue. Talking about rates. Okay, up the top, you've got rates revenue of just over 12 million. The annual plan you're approving to go to 14.3 million. Now, what percentage is that increase?
So I believe that's the 24-25 rates of 12 million, councillor, and the rates in the LTP for 25-26 were 14.8, and we've actually set them at 14.3.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
So I can't do that calculation quickly off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Certainly confirm that to you. So in effect, what we're saying is that the rates we'd agreed in the long-term plan, we're actually setting our rates at a lower level than we'd actually set them in the long-term plan.
Well, to me, it's 18.9%.
Okay.
12 million to 14.3 million is actually 18.9%.
So my colleague has just very cleverly sent me a message and confirmed you are correct. That's correct. So that's the rate increase, 18.92%. My colleagues just told me.
But that's not what's in the front here. Peter's saying it's 12%.
So, sorry, councillor, are you referring to the general rate increase of 12%?
The general rate increase, yes.
Sorry, and that's rates as a total. And there's a subtle difference in the description. One is just part of that rate increase, and one is the total rate increase.
The total rate increase for the West Coast Regional Council was 18.9%.
We probably
And that's not correct. No, that's
This is correct, Mr. Chair. The general rates increase is 12%, as we'd already agreed.
yes.
But the total rates,
Total,
councillor
because-
Pitch was correct.
because the general rate doesn't include the uniform annual charge.
So we've actually included the UAGC at 12%, and that was one of the earlier conversations we had. I remember councillor Cummings was quite instrumental in that conversation as to whether we have it at a different rate or not. And the UAGC is absolutely part of that 12% general rate.
And the one plan,
So the one plan's a separate level, councillor, and
So the one plan was actually set at the LTP rate.
civil defence.
Well, two different things.
No, so can I
Plan.
just be really clear here? So we're talking, we want to need to get this very, very accurate, and I'm just concerned at the moment that we're not, and we've probably got media covering this and members of the public, right? So we need to be very clear here. Okay, so we're talking about general rate, uniform annual charge, and then councillor Birchwood, you're taking us into targeted rates. Okay, now targeted rates and general rate are separate buckets, as you're well aware, Councillor Birchfield. TTPP and Civil Defence Emergency Management are targeted rates and are not part of general rate, just like the flood schemes.
Well, they should be.
They should be. Well, that hasn't been even in your time as the chair like that, Mr. Chairman.
Do you include the rating districts in the 14 million?
No, we're telling you what the general rate is as an increase. And look, I really want to note that Councillor Birchfield, and I remember clearly, you did not, and that's fine, your prerogative, you did not, you wanted your vote recorded against adopting the LTP.
Yep.
So it's not surprising that you're voting against today, because we're in line with the LTP that the rest of your colleagues voted for.
I don't agree with the LTP.
No, well, I understand why you don't agree with the LTP, Councillor Birchfield, because we had 8 long, hard workshops, which, excuse me, I'm letting Pod speak.
You finish.
Yep, I certainly will. We had 8 long workshops, which we discussed and went through the staff of all the funding and all what was a requirement of council to get this organisation back on track. It was a decimated sort of business when we come in here. And we actually got that. We worked really hard, the councillors. You chose not to attend any of those meetings, which was a bit of a, I think it was an insult to your fellow councillors and to the staff, and a bit of a kick in the guts to the ratepayers, really. But we actually set up that long-term plan. We only had 25 submissions to that draft annual plan, that long-term plan. We had 25 submissions, and the council here heard all those submissions. You did not attend any of those at that submission period, and then you voted against it. And you keep bringing up things. So this whole council came up with a long-term plan. This is the annual plan in year 2 to get this organisation back on track. And I find it offensive that you actually keep bringing up. Now, over the years, we have had, and I've got the media articles here, which we have had false things that said regional rates jumped 38% in Greymouth. And that was just totally incorrect, because the 38% was actually the percentage of what the rate take was for the Grey District, as opposed to Buller and Westland. So we've had all this false media. And in fact, the average rate increase last year was 8. If you took what you're saying, the average, it was actually 8.8%. Even though our general rate was 27%, it's only one component of the rate take. We've got the UAG and then we've got all our targeted rates. So that, am I right, Peter Miller, on that? Yes. Thank you. Yep. So we still, the problem is with the targeted rates, Councillor Birchfield, the rating is different for different people. You may not be aware, but what happens is we've got all these different rating areas. So Hokitika has a special rate in its targeted rates for the Hokitika flood scheme. Greymouth has for the Greymouth one. Westport has for the Westport one. Punakaiki does, all the different rates. So different people have different targeted rates, and that's all set out in this document. But if you took an average on that whole thing across there, it's quite different. So that's why we're actually saying it's 12% as we
For general.
the general rates. Yep.
So if I can, what I will add in is that the percentage increase that we'd set out in the long-term plan from year 1 to year 2 is 23%. And that's what we'd actually set out at that point in time. What we're actually now setting out is a lower overall increase in our rates than we set out in the long-term plan. The general rate component of that is 12%, and the other components are the targeted rates. Now, the targeted rates vary, as you appreciate. I mean, you've all been engaged in quite a lot of the rating district meetings. You've set and agreed those rating district meetings, and obviously what we've just done, and this revenue statement in here talks to the rating district level for Franz Joseph, for example, at 262. Obviously, it's going to be slightly less again, as you appreciate, because that's what you've just set out. So I'm not going to do a quick calculation on that, but obviously it's different from here again. So it's not going to be that 23, which is what we agreed with the community at that point in time. It's not now going to be the 18.92%. It'll be slightly under that again. Does that help in terms of the?
Yeah, look,
Clear.
I can understand the rating districts for the stock banks can't be included in the calculation. That's separate. Some people are in, some people are out. But
Yeah.
the other three targeted rates, the one plan, civil defence, and there's another one, uniform annual charge, that's all in the general rate. That should be in the general rate.
I hear where you're coming from, Councillor. But what we've done historically is had the general rate and UAGC together. That's a component of it, and the targeted rates for the one emergency management is separate to that. What we have done is budget clarity this year, and what or recalculated what those targeted rates should include.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that councillors at the last few meetings actually discussed some of those elements in terms of what is within, for example, the emergency management, what's that going to be made up of? And the TTPP, the one plan was also discussed in terms of what we now need to do now we've got better visibility on that. And yes, that is a higher level of increase than we had previously on the one plan, but that's because of the visibility of the data now, and we didn't have that previously. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Darryl, do you want to say something? Or?
Yeah, I did actually. Look, I want to acknowledge Councillor Birchfield that the TTPP and the Civil Defence Emergency Management rate is a rate across the whole region,
Yes.
Which is your point, right?
Yes.
And why isn't a general rate? I just want to give you the rationale as I understand it, but this rationale was in place before I started, and that is that the rationale for target rating those two costs was because we're actually rating for them and delivering them for the whole of the West Coast and the 3 districts. And the thought was to actually separate out those costs, make it really apparent that the civil defence costs and the TTPP costs, we're rating and delivering those services on behalf of the district councils, and to separate that out and make it very transparent to the community and our colleague councils on what those costs are.
Yep.
The emergency management rate was actually brought up, and we discussed that at the last meeting, and that was approved by all councils other than yourself, Councillor Birchfield. So just to remind you, yep.
I need to answer what you said before. I've been on this council 20 years.
Yep.
I've attended most of the general meetings. I reckon I've got a very good record of attendance. Now, when I started to question this, you started a personal attack on me.
No, it's not a personal attack. I based on facts, Councillor.
Why don't you answer and deal with what I'm talking about instead of personally attacking me? This is your leadership.
No.
Brett,
I'm going to close down the conversation because you are grandstanding again. You've asked Councillor Birchfield, you have asked the question of the staff, you've been answered it, and I'll bring it again. Are you voting for item 4, to approve the annual plan 25-26, or you voted against it? You voted against it, according to your vote against it. Pardon? You voted against it. Thank you. Yep. Councillor Ewan, one last comment.
I understood the conversation there. I understand the points made by myself, Stuart and Peter. The one plan, that's by decree from government, we have to do it. Civil defence, it's a mandatory thing again. CDs, same. EV protocols, we're the first in the country to do it, and I think it's picking up that now. And one thing about plans, and this plan is no different, if you want to have input on it, you've got to be energised to attend the workshops, because that's where our bread and butter is done. And I'll say that first up. And with plans, the very nature of them, the future ain't what it used to be. The future is change. And that's what we're about. We're addressing the change. A lot of it's been forced upon us. And I think this council punches above its weight, and we're doing a good job. We're either collectively doing it or we're not. If we're not, that's fine. People got their own opinions. But the thrust of where we're heading is on target. And I think we going forward are going to be in a bit better position by grabbing the bull by the horns last time and doing this incremental thing than doing it over many years. We've done that and we're on that pathway. Long may it continue because we couldn't stay where we were.
Thanks, councillor Ewan. Right, we're moving on. Item 5.
Sorry. One last thing, I apologise, this is an error on my behalf. I may have mentioned 8% increase previously, and that my colleague has just corrected me, it's 13% last year, not 8%.
13. Yep, that was the average.
That was the average.
Okay. Thank you. Right, item 5, approve that the chief executive can make minor formatting changes to the annual plan to enable publication, including updating financial statements, should council resolve to accept the Franz Joseph, which we have, Franz Joseph Joint Committee recommendation for the rates for the operation and maintenance of that special rating district and the associated infrastructure. Move for that, please.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you. Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Cummings. All in favour, say aye. So carried unanimously. Right, we'll move on next to page 93, which is the adoption report, and that's the rates resolution for 2025-26. Stuart, do you want to speak to this one?
What we've done this year is a different approach, and I mentioned that at the previous council meeting. We are setting the rates for the year based on a yield calculation. Now, you'll be aware of what we did last year with the long-term plan. We based that on a yield factor calculation. That actually got quite complex. Basing on a yield is legally robust. It gives certainty to council, and that's how we've been able to calculate the financials. So going through that process, A, makes it more logical, but B, and I haven't detailed this in the paper, and I apologize for that. Just for clarity, what will happen afterwards, after the year is set, and that's the formal process of council setting the rates for the year. We'll keep council advised as to what the factors will be, a paper that will come to council in the next couple of months. So that's not a decision-making paper, that's a noting paper. So as you're aware, normally we set the yield and the factors. This is just the yield. This is the legal position we need to be in.
So what Stuart's talking about is the fact that we will get that amount of money. What's happened in the past, I think, is we've set factors, and as properties have changed and things have moved around, we end up with a different number when we go through the final rate setting process. And so this just basically sets expectation around the annual plan and gives the community certainty around what we're going to be looking to rate for. So it's a slightly different nuance to where we've been in the past.
That's correct. And there are some other differences as well. I just want to point out to council, if that's okay. As you'll be aware, council has decided to put the Raft Creek rating district scheme into abeyance. For clarity, what I've done is included the Raft Creek rating district in the rating financial and funding impact statement, but shown that at 0. On the opposite side of that, the Nelson Creek separate rating area, I've actually shown, because that was 0 last year, but not shown. And I really like the clarity of showing everything. So Nelson Creek comes back in, but that will be rated as you have agreed with the rating district. The Rappahoe rating district is also shown, and that's been discussed at the previous council meeting. And the last thing on this is just for ease, actually, for our community, engagement document. Put them into our, and that's a simple little thing. It actually just makes it a little bit more usable for our community, and that's the goal. I mean, this is our commitment to them, so it's got to be usable for our community. Those are the key things I actually wanted to point out within this. Obviously, there's the discussion we've already had, and you've already taken the decision on Franz Joseph. So, in effect, that's mute now, but just wanted to point that out, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Righto. So we're going to move the recommendations. And I'll get a first mover and a seconder, and then we'll open for discussions. So we just note the paper to council on the annual plan decision by council for the level of rates set for Franz Joseph rating area. Noted that we resolved pursuant to section 23 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002 to set the rates, due dates for repayment of the rates, and penalties regime as set out in the attachments to this report for the year commencing 1 July 2025 and ending 30th of June 2026. And 3, will delegate authority pursuant to the Local Government Rating Act 2002 to the Chief Executive Officer and the Group Manager, Corporate Services, any one of them acting alone, to A, apply penalties on unpaid rates, and B, approve applications for rates postponement and rates remissions in accordance with the council's policy. Do I have a move for that? Councillor Cummings, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Open it up for discussion or questions.
Actually, this only applies to the Friends, doesn't it? This is only for the Friends, the decision we made on the Friends, Joseph. These recommendations only apply to that.
No, this is the adoption of the rates resolution 2025-2026. So what we're doing here, Councillor Birchfield, we're setting the rates, and after we've taken all those other things we've discussed at the June meeting lapse.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments?
Just on the Franz Joseph one, the criticism directed at this council historically, especially down there, has been communication, and it's very disappointed that only one person's responded to that letter we put out where we tried to engage and communicate. And this is pretty important for them, and there's such a laissez-faire attitude that she'll be right and we don't need to respond, leaving it up to her. I'm pretty disappointed if that's not the right direction we should be going if I was a ratepayer, or if we're, making the decision. But I respect their view. If they don't want to respond, well, the status quo is what it's going to be, but there'll be a day of reckoning down the track. I just shake my head at that, but that's their decision.
Yep. Any further questions or comments? Or right, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Councillor Birchfield, you record against it. That's it. Well, thank you very much, councillors, for this meeting to adopt the annual plan, and thank you very much for staff for all the great effort that's been put into this, and I think it's a good document going forward. And thank everyone for their attendance.